Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the olive groves of ancient Greece. Not the glistening marbles of myth, but the dry, dust-bitten paths where sandals crunch and nobody's name echoes in history. It's a place where the sun arrives early, where the soil is older than your family name, and where power smells less like ambition and more like sweat, fear, and bureaucracy. If you're looking for democracy and golden ideals, you may not survive this version. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake on a pallet made of straw and faded expectations. The clay floor beneath you is cool, cracked in places, smelling faintly of damp earth and old oil. Your body aches, not from battle or sport, but from existence, lifting jars, grinding grain, stooping low under expectations you didn't write. You're a medic, maybe. A resident foreigner in Athens, allowed to live here, taxed for the privilege, excluded from citizenship, no matter how well you speak the language or how long your family's been here. You might even be a citizen technically, but the wrong kind. Too poor, too voiceless, or maybe you're something else entirely, something lower, someone owned. The air is already thick with the promise of heat. The household begins to stir, though household might be generous. It's a space with walls, a roof, and a hierarchy that's more rigid than the columns holding up the temple down the street. You rub sleep from your eyes and hear the clatter of terracotta outside. Someone's drawing water. You know better than to wait for a call. Your place in the day begins before your name is ever spoken. You step outside into light so bright it makes the shadows seem deeper. The dirt road is lined with low walls, fig trees, and people pretending not to notice each other. The baker's boy nods at you. You nod back. You both know not to ask questions. You pass a woman carrying a jug, not a citizen likely, possibly enslaved. Her head is down, her shoulders practiced at invisibility. She smells of barley and fatigue. No one moves out of her way. A man in a finely dyed chiton strides past, head high. He doesn't see her. He doesn't see you. You arrive at the small stall where you work. Olives. Always olives. Crushed, pressed, pickled, traded. You've grown to hate their oil-slick sheen, but their currency, nourishment. In this city, even the gods eat olives. You sweep, you sort. You nod at men with opinions and sandals nicer than yours. You smile when the soldier's wife haggles and pretends to be poor. You measure carefully when the tax official stops by for a taste. Behind the stall, the landowner's children laugh. They've never carried a pot on their shoulders or hidden behind a wall during a political purge. Their laughter sounds like it belongs to someone else's story. Historians still argue whether Greek society was truly as harsh as it sometimes appears in fragments. Pottery shards show smiles. Inscriptions mention rights. Plays suggest everyone had a voice, so long as that voice belonged to a freeborn male citizen with property and a voting pebble. But the streets tell a different story. You eat your midday meal in silence, a piece of bread, a smear of fig paste, the luxury of shade. Around you, men argue politics. Not you, not your place. The ecclesia meets today, but you are not invited. They debate war, trade, taxes. You debate whether there's enough water left to wash with. By dusk, your back hurts, your feet are raw, and the olives remain endless. You walk home in the half-light. Children dart between buildings. Someone's singing badly from an upstairs window. Someone else is being told to be quiet. You pass a small statue tucked into a niche. Aphrodite, maybe, though her nose has long since vanished. Offerings at her feet. A coin, a flower, a strip of cloth. You drop a fig pit. Not out of belief, out of habit. You reach your room. The clay walls hold the day's heat. You lie down again on your straw, the same as you did this morning. Nothing's changed, but the olives still glisten. The taxes still rise. The statues still watch. And you're still breathing. Before the sun rises, someone else is already awake. You hear it first. The dull rhythm of a stone grinding against grain, that steady circular scrape like a heartbeat made of effort. You sit up slowly, not quite ready to be part of the world again, but already caught in its machinery. You step outside and find her. She kneels near the doorway, arms working in practiced motion. Her back is straight, her eyes low. Her fingers, dusted in flour, never stop. A slave of the household, not a servant, not an employee, property. She doesn't look up when you approach. She doesn't need to. You sit nearby, close enough to feel the weight of her labor, not close enough to speak. Words wouldn't change anything. She's younger than you, maybe, or maybe older. It's hard to tell when wear reshapes the face faster than time. She finishes grinding, ties her hair back with a strip of faded cloth, and moves on. Drawing water now. You follow, both of you silent. The well is farther than it should be. Athens is proud of many things, but plumbing isn't one of them. You carry 2 empty jugs. She carries 4. The path is uneven, the stones placed by someone who never had to walk them barefoot. Your sandals catch once or twice. Hers don't. She's used to bleeding. You reach the well, just as the first light splits the sky. The marble glows like something trying too hard to be beautiful. She lowers the first jug slowly, muscles moving with the quiet strength of repetition. You watch her pour, lift, balance the jugs on her shoulders with a grace that shames the statues in the agora. On the way back, a man whistles. Not at you, at her. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't blink. She doesn't change her pace. But her jaw tightens, just for a moment. You glance at the man. He shrugs, as if to say, it's not like she can object. Historians still argue whether ancient slavery was more humane than what came later. If Greek masters respected their slaves, if the enslaved could buy freedom, own property, earn status. But what do you call a life where silence is the only safe choice? Back at the home, she disappears behind a curtain, into the inner chamber, the one where food is prepared, but never eaten, where voices echo, but never speak freely. You stay outside, watching the dust rise as other slaves begin their tasks. One boy sweeps a courtyard already clean. Another scrubs the floor while a dog watches, unconvinced. A woman, maybe 30, maybe 50, spins wool with fingers so quick they blur. None of them make eye contact. Not with each other, not with you. They're used to being seen as background, like the stones, like the olive trees, part of the scene, not the story. Later, you see her again, carrying bread now, not for herself. She offers a piece to a child who reaches without hesitation. You wonder if the child knows her name. She passes you once more before noon. This time, her eyes flick up. Brief, but enough. A moment of acknowledgement. Not quite solidarity, but something. You don't smile. You just nod. The day wears on. The market hums. The air thickens with heat and gossip. By late afternoon, She's back at the well. You don't follow this time. You just sit, back against the wall, wondering how long anyone can carry silence before it crushes them. The sun begins to fall, and she is still working. By the time you reach the agora, the day has begun to swell with that particular kind of heat that makes even the statues look exhausted. Dust curls from sandals, and the murmur of voices rises like incense. Layers of debate, complaint, deals, and declarations. You step into it like a fish into a crowded stream, not to swim, but to avoid drowning. The agora is a stage. It isn't just where people buy olives and gossip about the latest political scandal. It's where the city shows itself, postures, poses, and pretends. Men in pale chitons stand in clusters, gesturing dramatically. A few lean against pillars, as if the fate of Athens itself depends on their angle of repose. You stand near the edge. Not invisible, just peripheral. There's a speaker today, standing on a block of stone, as if height can grant him wisdom. He's talking about grain prices, about the upcoming vote on military expansion, about the importance of unity, especially from those who own at least one vineyard. You listen, because you're here. Because listening is the only kind of participation you're allowed. You are not a landowning male citizen. You cannot vote. You cannot speak. You cannot even raise your hand unless it's to carry something heavy for someone more qualified to matter. You look around. Others like you stand at the fringes. Medics, the sons of freed slaves, the occasional poor farmer who walked 2 days to not be noticed. They pretend to shop, to barter, to stretch, but their eyes track the speaker, just like yours. Historians still debate how inclusive Athenian democracy really was. Some argue it was revolutionary, a model of citizen involvement. Others note that most people were excluded, and that even among the privileged, the system was riddled with manipulation, influence, and coercion. You'd agree, if asked. But no one asks you. The speaker's voice rises. He waves his arms. He quotes Solon, misquotes Solon. Everyone nods. No one corrects him. A man near you mutters a joke under his breath. You don't laugh. Not because it isn't funny, but because the wrong laugh, from the wrong person, gets noticed. You move on. Past the stalls where dried figs are sold by weight and reputation. Past the shop that sharpens blades, though only for those preparing for something heroic. You pass the scribes who sit with tablets and styluses, recording decrees that won't affect you. You step aside when a boy, not yet 15, rushes past you with the self-importance of someone who will vote before he shaves. You duck into the shade of a stoa, columns rising around you like ribs in stone. Here, the philosophers gather, old men and students, noses burned, sandals frayed, arguing whether virtue can exist without knowledge and whether slaves can possess either. You sit on the edge of a step and listen. One man says slavery is natural. Another says it's efficient. A third quotes Aristotle, who hasn't even been born yet. You rest your chin on your hand and wonder what it means to hear men debate freedom while a slave passes behind them, balancing a tray of wine he won't taste. A gust of wind stirs the dust. It makes the voices blur together. Someone asks a question about justice. Someone else asks whether women have souls. The men chuckle. You don't. The sun shifts. Your shadow stretches along the marble. A group of boys nearby draws lots from a jar. White stones, black stones. It's how juries are chosen. You wonder what it feels like to have the city ask for your opinion by lottery. To be counted. To matter. Eventually the crowd thins. The speaker steps down. The scribes close their tablets. A slave gathers the amphorae from the steps. You rise, stretch, dust your knees. Another day in the Polis. Another voice you didn't get to use. But you were here. You watched. You remembered. And sometimes, memory is the only vote you get. You follow the sound of bronze against shield, dull thuds that echo like drums being played by a nervous god. The sun is higher now, pinned to the sky like a warning. You walk past more traders, more shadows, more conversations about glory that never mention the price. At the edge of the training ground, you pause. Rows of young men move in near unison, their sandals digging into the dusty ground with choreographed precision. They are not soldiers yet, but they are practicing how to die looking impressive. Each one carries a hoplon, a shield broad enough to hide behind, yet narrow enough to demand skill. They march in lines, then in a phalanx, shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, a wall with breath. You stand apart, but close enough to smell sweat and ambition. The trainer, a man whose voice could scare a lion, barks corrections in bursts. He circles the formation, calling out missteps, lecturing on honor, discipline, and how best to hold your spear without poking your neighbor in the thigh. You watch. You do not train. You don't own land. You don't own armor. You don't even own your afternoon. The men here are the sons of citizens. They are guaranteed a place in the phalanx because they have something to protect. You, your kind, are the ones they're allegedly fighting for, but also the ones they'll push aside when the feasting starts. Historians still argue whether military service was a unifier or a filter. Some say the Hoplite phalanx made men equal, standing side by side, no matter their wealth. Others point out that if you couldn't afford bronze, your shield was made of wood, and if it cracked, so did your social standing. You move closer as one young man stumbles, tripping over his own expectations. The trainer curses, the others laugh. The boy's shield skids across the ground. It stops at your feet. You pick it up. It's heavy, not just in weight, but in implication. The trainer sees you. His brow furrows. He walks over, takes the shield from your hands like it's been dirtied. You watch in medic, he mutters. Hope you're learning. You nod. You're always learning. You stay a little longer, memorizing the steps, the angles, the rhythm of movement. Not because you'll ever be invited to join, but because you want to know how these people prepare for war while pretending they're philosophers. Eventually, the training ends. The young men scatter, flushed and laughing. One has blood on his knuckles and pride in his eyes. You walk the perimeter of the field and find a discarded strap, leather, frayed, but strong. You tuck it into your belt, something useful. The sun burns higher. You pass a statue of Ares, mid-stride, mid-roar. Someone has painted a smear of red on his lips. You wonder if it was meant as a joke or a prophecy. You stop by a well, splash water on your face. It smells like minerals and metal. You lean against the stone and watch the dust settle. There is no honor in this place for you. But still, you memorize their drills, their language, their weakness. One boy, no older than 15, drops a spear as he passes you. He sneers like he meant to. His teeth are too white for someone who's ever bitten real fear. You let him go. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a battlefield isn't the shield. It's the person who's never been invited to carry one. The women do not speak when you pass. They watch, from windows, behind curtains, through doorways, barely ajar. Their eyes track your movement, not because you matter, but because motion, is the only part of the outside world they get to witness without leaving footprints. You walk past the entrance to a modest home, one of the many in Athens that claims order, with a clean threshold and painted pottery in the corners. Inside, a woman sits weaving, her loom steady, her hands faster than thought. She doesn't pause when the child beside her asks a question. She answers softly, never looking up. Her world is measured in thread count. The inner chamber smells of wool, olive oil, and containment. You step through the back entrance. No one stops you. No one notices. You aren't supposed to be here. Not really. But you keep your eyes low and your steps quiet. The Gyneceum is where Athenian women spend most of their days. Not by choice, by design. Here, the walls are not just physical, they're social. Women of citizen status are kept separate, hidden from the eyes of men who are not their husbands. They run the household, manage the servants, raise the children. They control everything inside the home and nothing outside of it. A girl about 10 years old walks past you, balancing a basket of figs with more grace than most athletes. She catches your eye for a moment, and in that flash, you see the shape of her future. Veils, dowry negotiations, silence. Historians still debate the lives of Greek women. Were they truly confined, or just differently powerful? Some point to festivals, religious roles, and the occasional educated woman as signs of agency. Others argue those were exceptions, carefully curated performances of liberty that only highlighted the everyday restrictions. You believe the walls because you can see them. In the way these women walk, always toward a chore, never toward themselves. In the way they lower their gaze before men who do not lower theirs in return. In the way laughter is allowed, but only in rooms without windows. You sit by the door, near the threshold, and watch as an older woman arranges offerings near a small household shrine. Hera today, maybe Hestia tomorrow. The gods are many, but few live in these walls. She lights a bit of incense. The smoke curls upward. One woman whispers a prayer. Another adjusts the wick of a lamp. You listen, not for gossip, for tone, rhythm. Every word is soft, not weak, controlled. You hear one woman speak of her husband's debts in a way that sounds like she's describing a weather pattern. Another sighs about a neighbor's unfaithful son, as if reciting a recipe. No anger, but layers, like sediment. The girl with the figs returns. She offers one to you without speaking. You take it, bite into it. It's overripe, bleeding sugar, too much sweetness for a room this restrained. You thank her with a nod. She smiles, briefly, then returns to her weaving lesson. Later, you slip out quietly, stepping into the open street where voices are louder, more confident, and less aware of their weight. The sun hits your shoulders. The air tastes like city again. Sour wine, charcoal, ambition. You look back once. A curtain flutters. No one waves. But you feel watched. Not with fear, with memory. Because behind those walls are people who know everything and are told nothing. The man in the square is shouting again. You've seen him before. Beard unruly, eyes bright with something too sharp to be joy. He's standing on an overturned crate, arms wide, declaring the supremacy of Greeks over barbarians. The crowd watches him, with the indulgence one might offer a drunk uncle at a symposium. Some nod, some yawn, a few laugh. You stand at the edge, arms crossed, sandals coated in the same dust he's kicking up with each proclamation. He names the Persians first, soft, decadent, conquered in spirit before spear. Then the Thracians, wild, unshaven lovers of wine and chaos. Then the Phoenicians, clever thieves with tongues of gold and fingers always in someone else's economy. And then everyone else. If you're not Greek, he says, you are something less than whole. He quotes a line from a play, badly. He raises his hand and proclaims that the gods speak Greek, and if you don't, you'd better learn fast or enjoy your afterlife in silence. The crowd chuckles. You do not. You've heard this tune before. Barbaros. That's the word they use. Not quite an insult, but definitely not a compliment. It simply means, not us. Not Athens. Not Sparta. Not Thebes. Not properly human. Just a babble of nonsense syllables, masquerading as speech. Historians still debate the origin of the word, but most agree. It mimics the sound of foreign languages, bar, like meaningless chatter. You think about how many people have been dismissed by that sound. You step away from the speaker and wander down a quieter path. In a shaded courtyard, a boy recites Homer in a sing-song voice to his tutor. You pause and listen to the rhythm. You recognize the tale, Odysseus and the Cyclops, the clever trickster, the dumb giant, a story of civilization outsmarting the uncultured brute. Again, you keep walking. Past a pottery stall where a vase depicts Heracles wrestling a lion with the smirk of someone who thinks muscle equals morality. Past a shop selling amulets to ward off foreign curses. Past a man spitting into the dust after mentioning the Scythians. You remember that the Scythians were excellent horsemen. You wonder if that's why they're hated. Because they didn't need the land to feel at home. At the edge of the city, you find a gathering of workers unloading grain. One is from Lydia. His accent sings when he talks. His arms are inked with symbols you don't understand. He lifts a sack heavier than your doubt and sets it down like it's nothing. Another man, clearly local, rolls his eyes. Barbaros, he mutters. The Lydian smiles and mutters something back, low, polite, and absolutely cutting. You pretend not to hear, but your smirk gives you away. Later, you sit under an olive tree near the boundary marker of the city. The line between Polis and not Polis. Greek and not Greek. A dog passes, a real philosopher. No nation, no allegiance, just fur and direction. You watch the road that leads out of the city. You think about who built it, about the stones laid by hands that didn't speak the right language. You pick up a pebble, roll it in your hand, and wonder how many borders it's crossed without asking permission. You lie back, staring at the sky. No accent there, no alphabet, just blue. The assembly meets under a sky that pretends to be fair. You walk past the line of men gathered at the Nix, the rocky hill where the voice of democracy is supposed to rise like incense. The stone slopes are uneven, smoothed by sandals and decades of declarations. You stop at the base, where the shade is thin and the voices echo just enough to reach you. Only citizens may ascend, male, free, aged enough to fight, owned enough to matter. You are none of those things, or maybe just one. Either way, the stairs are not for you. You find a spot under a fig tree. Ironic, really, given how many philosophical truths have been twisted under fig trees. From here, you watch. A speaker stands tall on the bema, hands wide, chin high, using every part of his body to say, I belong here. His chiton is pristine. His voice carries. They're voting on a new tax for grain imports. They're also debating whether a certain man, one you recognize from the market, should be stripped of citizenship for mismanaging temple funds. You squint. It's theater. Each man casts his vote with a pebble. White for yes, black for no. They walk to the amphora, drop their stone, and walk away, heads held high like generals leaving the battlefield. You wonder what their wives think, behind their walls. You wonder what the slaves think, carrying the records. You wonder what the gods think, listening from a sky that never votes. Historians still argue whether Athenian democracy was revolutionary or performative, whether it empowered the many or merely distracted them. Some praise it as the first glimmer of civic voice. Others call it a polished oligarchy, built on the backs of those who never stood on the bema. You call it something else entirely, a chorus that doesn't hear its own silence. You shift under your fig tree. The fruit is unripe, bitter, but the shade is good. Nearby, a boy too young to vote throws rocks at a beetle. He misses every time. One man in the assembly shouts a quote from Solon. Another corrects him. They argue. The crowd laughs. A stray dog lies across the path, ignoring them all. You watch as the votes are counted. No speeches now, just numbers, tallied in silence by someone who probably couldn't vote either. The man accused is spared, barely. One pebble saves his name. Everyone cheers like it was never close. You wonder how many votes were cast by men who understood the issue. You wonder how many were cast out of habit. As the crowd disperses, you linger. The platform is empty now, just a block of stone. You step closer, daring a little rebellion. Your feet touch the edge of the space that makes men gods and gods bureaucrats. You place your hand on the stone. It's warm, not from the sun, from memory. The speeches stay with it, the lies too. You leave before someone sees you. The fig tree waves in the wind as if applauding your exit. Later, you tell no one where you stood, because memory is a kind of vote. And sometimes, silence is a speech. Sparta does not invite you. It commands. You cross the hills slowly, the dust different here, redder, heavier, as if stained by the memory of too many boots and too few questions. The buildings are simple, nothing ornate, stone that doesn't pretend, columns that do not boast, no statues of poets, only warriors. You keep your eyes down. The streets are quiet, but not peaceful, like a pause between breaths when the air is deciding whether to fight or flee. Children march in lines, tunics tight across narrow shoulders, heads shaved, eyes blank. They chant, not joyfully, not angrily, just rhythmically, a rhythm pressed into them by sleep deprivation and hunger. You see one boy stumble. No one helps. The trainer glares. The boy scrambles back to his place. The line moves on. You turn away. Behind a low wall, a group of women weave. Their arms are strong. Their hands do not tremble. They talk in low tones, sharp and fast, not submissive, focused. You pass a field where older boys wrestle under the eye of a man, with arms like tree trunks and a face like stone. The boys are bleeding. No one flinches. You remember hearing that Spartan boys are taught to steal and punished not for the theft, but for being caught. Historians still debate whether Sparta was a utopia of equality or a dystopia of discipline. Some praise its courage. Others wince at its cost. Here, the Helots, enslaved locals, farm the land so warriors can train. They are watched, always watched. Rebellion is expected, beaten down with annual ritual. You see one Helot woman walking back from the fields, a basket on her hip. Her eyes meet yours, but only briefly. She doesn't smile. You don't either. You pass the central square where elders sit in silence. They wear red cloaks, clean, folded just so. Their eyes are like knife blades. You nod slightly. They do not nod back. A young soldier stands by a statue of Lycurgus, lawgiver and myth. He's sharpening his spear, slowly. like a metaphor. You ask no questions. You listen. To the silence, to the drills, to the sound of a city that has made obedience its god. You step into a mess hall, not invited, just swept in by the crowd. Bread coarse, wine thin, meat salty. Conversation, none. You eat. Slowly. Someone passes you a bowl. You nod. That is thanks enough. Later, outside the barracks, you see two men sparring. Not for fun. For the kind of memory that bruises deeper than muscle. One bleeds from the lip. The other does not apologize. You sit on a stone wall. Watch the moon rise. Here, there are no courtyards for philosophers. No public debates. Here, there is function. Here, there is control. Here, you cannot mistake survival for freedom. Eventually, a boy approaches. You expect him to ask who you are. He doesn't. He just sits beside you, stares at the same moon. You don't speak. You just breathe in time with this place. Sharp, deliberate, unforgiving. You find the philosopher under a fig tree, of course. Where else would he be? He's old, by city standards. Thin, but not frail. The kind of thin that comes from pacing, not starving. His tunic is plain, his beard is unreasonably confident, and he's drawing circles in the dirt with a stick like truth, is hiding under the topsoil. You sit nearby, not too close. His students form a loose semicircle. Most are young, bright-eyed, hungry not for food, but for frameworks. They nod often. Too often, you nod less. He's talking about justice, naturally, about how every soul has a place, about harmony, about reason ruling appetite. He draws 3 lines: mind, will, desire. He names them parts of the self. Balanced, he says, this is virtue. You want to ask about the part of the soul that carries water at dawn and weaves without thanks, the part that bleeds in silence. But you don't speak. He gestures to a student. What is freedom? He asks. The boy replies, to act in accordance with reason. The philosopher smiles like a potter admiring his kiln. You tilt your head. Freedom here is theoretical, abstract, sanitized. You glance around. A slave pours wine behind the fig tree. Another collects the discarded cups. Neither is named. Neither is included in the question. You think about that. Historians still argue whether Greek philosophy acknowledged the contradictions it lived among. Some say Plato, Aristotle, and others knew, had to know, that their ideals floated on a raft of oppression. Others claim they separated ethics from politics, the way farmers separate grain from chaff. You wonder how a man can teach virtue on the backs of men forbidden to speak. You wonder if they ever taught under olive trees instead. Maybe that's where the honesty is. The philosopher moves on, to love now, to beauty. He names it a form of perfection. You think of the women you passed behind lattice windows, perfect in stillness, unseen in theory. A student asks about the soul's immortality, another about the nature of truth. No one asks who grinds the grain for the evening symposium. You stand to leave. The philosopher doesn't notice, but one student does. A girl, hair pulled back, eyes too sharp to be fooled by diagrams in the dirt. She nods. Once. You nod back. Later, you walk past the school again. It's quieter now. The tree shadows stretch long, and someone has swept away the circles. You think about how many truths get erased before nightfall. You find a bench, really just a stone someone sat on long enough to make a dent, and you sit. A child runs past, chasing a hoop. A man follows carrying scrolls. A dog barks at both and seems to win the argument. You pull a pebble from your pouch, smooth, flat. You carve 3 lines into it with your nail. Mind, will, desire. You toss it into the fig tree's roots. Let the philosopher find it later, or not. The truth doesn't mind waiting. The port smells like ambition, rot, and distant storms. You stand at the edge of a creaking dock, watching a ship ease into the harbor like a cat pretending not to be wet. Its sails are patched, but proud. Its hull bears the paint of a dozen ports, faded blues, chipped reds, and a stubborn smear of something that might have once been a map. You came here not to travel, just to see who does. Men unload amphorae with the exhaustion of people who have carried too much for too long. Pottery from Rhodes, grain from Sicily, wine from wherever it fermented fastest. They bark commands in accents from every direction. Some you know, some you feel in your bones, but couldn't name. A girl, no older than 12, helps unload linen bundles. She doesn't flinch at the weight. She does flinch when a sailor shouts too loud. You turn away. Beyond the dock, a shipmaster scribbles onto a wax tablet, calculating what he owes and what he can pretend not to. A tax official hovers near. They circle each other like flies over salted meat. This is empire, you realize, not armies, not speeches, ledgers. Historians still argue whether colonization in ancient Greece was a necessity of population or a performance of power. They debate whether Greek settlers integrated with local people or replaced them, whether these colonies brought civilization or just paperwork and walls. You pass a merchant who boasts of having just returned from Cyrene. He waves a gold ring at a boy selling figs and calls him citizen of nowhere. The boy does not reply. He just sells his figs. You sit on a crate. The wood digs into your thighs. To your left, two men argue about property lines on some new colony. We cleared the land, one says. It was empty. You think about what empty means to someone with a sword and a storage jar. You wander toward the market stalls. New arrivals hawk amber beads, Eastern spices, Egyptian papyrus with half-familiar drawings. You pause at one cart. A woman offers you a stone with strange etchings. Thrace, she says. Good luck. You don't believe her, but you buy it anyway. You carry it with you, the way cities carry their contradictions, in plain view, pretending it's decorative. Later, you find a small farm outside the port, half swallowed by the dry hills. The owner brags that his family has worked this soil for generations. He doesn't mention the people whose terraces still line the ridge above. You rest beneath an olive tree, the same species, always the same, watching a slave boy guide a donkey along the irrigation trench. The boy whistles. The donkey ignores him. You close your eyes. You dream of a field, not conquered, not bought, just one that didn't need to prove its ownership to be real. You climb the temple steps slowly, half out of reverence, half out of weariness. Each slab of marble feels like it's judging your knees. The columns loom above, fluted and bright, catching the sun just enough to make you squint, even in the shadow they cast. The temple smells like burnt offerings and bureaucracy. Inside, it's quiet, but not peaceful, just hushed, like a room that holds too many unspoken conversations. A priest stands near the altar, robes clean, eyes sharp. He accepts a coin from a man who mumbles something about safe passage and wine prices. The priest nods, performs a blessing that is mostly hand movement and certainty, and moves on. You offer a small token, a fig, dried and wrinkled like time itself. The priest doesn't look at you directly, but takes it and places it beside the pile of other humble attempts at divine negotiation. You sit on the steps, outside now, staring at the statue of Athena. She does not blink. You've seen her before in miniature, on coins, on vases, in little household shrines. But here she is, terrifying. Not because of her spear, because of her stillness. You whisper a prayer, not out of faith, but out of habit. Not for success, for fairness. She doesn't answer. A group of girls pass, dressed in ceremonial white, carrying baskets of flowers and fresh wheat. They move like a song you've forgotten the words to. Behind them, a group of elders mutters about taxes, again. This time, it's about temple maintenance. And marble. Always marble. They complain that the gods are expensive to impress. Historians still argue whether Greek religion was heartfelt or transactional. Some say the temples were places of sincere devotion. Others claim they were stages for statecraft and wealth, cloaked in incense. You believe both. Because here, devotion is taxed, and piety is public. You wander around the side of the temple and find the smaller shrines, the less polished gods, the local ones. A grove of poplar trees rustles gently nearby. Someone has left a wreath made of garlic. You don't ask which god that's for. The wind shifts. A thin plume of smoke rises from the sacred hearth. A boy tends it carefully. You've heard stories about the penalty for letting it go out. You don't ask if he believes in the flame or just fears the consequences of doubt. You walk past a wall covered in inscriptions, edicts, decrees, names carved in neat rows, like the gods keep score with chisels. You spot one familiar name. He's been dead for 5 years, but his statue still gets oiled. You sit near the base of a lesser-known hero's plinth, one who won a naval battle no one sings about. His sword is chipped, his pedestal cracked. A pigeon nests behind his helmet. You like him. At least he's not pretending. The temple bell rings. Not for prayer, for taxes. Offerings are counted. Civic donations logged. Even the gods need accounting. You leave a pebble at Athena's feet. Not because it's sacred, because it's the only thing that still fits in your pocket. And you walk away. The sun hits your back. The statue does not move, but you feel watched. You follow the crowd to the edge of the square, where the courthouse sits like a stone mouth, waiting to swallow grievances. Today, the crowd is thicker, louder. A man has been accused of slandering the city. Not assault, not theft, words. You push through bodies, each one humming with anticipation. These trials aren't private. They're spectacles, theater but without masks, or maybe with better ones. The defendant stands tall, shoulders squared like someone trying to convince himself he's done nothing wrong. He wears a faded himation. His beard is too neat for someone accused of treason. He holds his tongue tightly between his teeth, while others speak for or against him. A slave stands behind him, silent, holding a tablet. Nearby, the accuser shouts that Athens must protect itself from rot, that ideas can be as dangerous as swords, that even speech must serve the Polis. The crowd murmurs. The judges sit like statues, tired ones. Their togas ripple gently in the breeze. A few scratch their beards. One sleeps, probably. You find a stone to sit on. The sun bakes your shoulders. Someone beside you mutters their opinion, then mutters the opposite 5 minutes later. You watch the defendant. He doesn't flinch when the vote begins. Little stones again, white and black, into 2 urns. Clinks echo through the square, like small decisions landing loudly. Historians still argue whether Athenian justice was fair or just fast. Some claim its public nature encouraged honesty. Others point out how easily crowds are swayed by loud voices and personal vendettas. You watch a man's fate get weighed like olives. The verdict comes. Guilty, barely. He's fine. Not exiled. Not killed. A win, maybe. He nods once, says nothing, walks away through a corridor of stairs. Later, you overhear a merchant joke that the real punishment is having to hear your name butchered in court. You walk past the outer wall of the courthouse. There's graffiti scratched into the stone, mockery, names, crude faces. One reads, "Democracy has 2 ears and no eyes." You think about that. At the fountain, a woman retells the entire trial to someone who wasn't there, rearranging facts like furniture. The man nods solemnly. He's already passed it on by the time you reach the olive press. You sit in the shade, fingers tracing grooves in the stone. You whisper the defendant's name to yourself, not out of loyalty, just to remember. So that not everything that happens in public gets erased in silence. You find them behind the stoa, seated on an overturned basket, carving something into the underside of a roof beam with a bit of broken bronze. A girl, maybe 13, maybe wiser. You sit nearby, pretending not to watch. She works quickly, like someone who knows how long she has before being told to stop. The scratches are shallow, precise, lines crossing, looping, curling. Not letters, not exactly, but symbols, shapes that hum with quiet resistance. You clear your throat softly. She doesn't stop, just says, "They cover it with paint in a few days. I do a new one every week." You nod, though she still doesn't look at you. Behind you, the city chatters as usual. Markets shouting prices, sandals slapping stone, citizens arguing over who misquoted whose father. But here, in this sliver of shade, something quieter is happening. This is resistance, not with swords or slogans, but with scratches. You glance up. A pattern in the beam's wood becomes a face. You don't ask if she meant it. She probably didn't, but maybe it's better to pretend she did. Historians still argue how resistance looked in ancient Greece. The plays, they say, the satire, the quiet choices not to vote or to whisper. They say women's resistance was in weaving, in song, in the myths they retold. They say slaves resisted in silence, in breaking jars, in teaching forbidden words. You say resistance is this: a girl with a tool and too much time to think. She stops suddenly, tucks the shard of bronze into her sleeve, and slips away without ceremony. You don't follow. Instead, you look up and memorize her lines. The way they cross, like networks. The way they avoid symmetry. Later, you walk through a courtyard where men read aloud from a new play. It's funny, on the surface. But you hear the barbs, jokes too sharp to be just jokes. A tyrant mocked for loving figs. A general described as having the courage of a drunk goat. The crowd laughs. You don't, because you hear the message below. Not everyone in Athens is shouting. Some whisper, some carve. Some laugh too hard at bad jokes and hope someone else notices. You pass an amphora painted with the usual scene. Gods conquering mortals, heroes subduing chaos. But behind the image is a small smear of red clay. Unintentional. Maybe. Maybe not. You sit in the shade of a temple wall. Watch a boy trace letters in the dirt with a stick. The name he writes is misspelled. Or maybe he's never seen it written. Or maybe it's a name not meant to be recorded. He wipes it away with his foot before standing. You sit there longer, drawing your own lines in the dust. Nothing permanent. But that's the point. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing is the thing that can be erased and remembered anyway. You wake to the sound of armor, not the clank of battlefield chaos, but the slow, deliberate arrangement of bronze plates being strapped to bodies, like promises no one intends to break. You sit up on the edge of a dry field, the sun barely above the hills, already smug. They're assembling. Rows of men, some too young to shave properly, others already limping from old injuries. Their tunics peek out from beneath breastplates. Their helmets catch the light. The spears are taller than their owners' ambitions. You watch from a rise in the earth, a safe distance away, unnoticed. They chant softly, a beat to march to, a reminder that breath is something they still control. A general speaks. His voice carries. He talks about duty, legacy, the city. He lists names of past battles like charms, mentions honor 6 times, mentions the dead only once. You think of the potter's son. He's somewhere in the second row, trying to look brave. He was sweeping floors 2 weeks ago. Now he holds a spear, like a question he hasn't learned how to ask. They march. The phalanx forms. Shields interlock. Sand shifts beneath their sandals. You move parallel along the hillside, keeping pace, but not presence. They chant louder now. Not for spirit, for rhythm. The kind that keeps your feet from thinking about running. Historians still argue whether hoplite warfare was truly egalitarian. Some say the shield wall made every man matter equally. Others note that when shields fail, it's the poorest whose names aren't recorded. You watch as they descend into a shallow valley. You don't follow. You sit under an olive tree, waiting. The sounds begin. First the clash, then the grunts, then silence. The kind of silence that only follows things that cannot be taken back. You stay until smoke rises, just a little, just enough to remind the gods someone remembered to die today. Later, they return. Fewer. No cheering, no songs, just the heavy thud of sandals and the rustle of cloth soaked in things that won't wash out. The potter's son does not return. His name is not carved into anything yet. You walk into the village behind them. No one celebrates. They just get back to buying figs. A woman kneels by a basin, scrubbing armor she cannot wear. A boy stands on a stool, trying to reach a helmet too big for his head. You watch a pair of hands collect the leftover spears, stacking them like firewood. No one notices you sitting on the steps of a broken fountain, turning a piece of pottery over and over in your hand. It has no decoration, just a red streak that might have been intentional, or might have been blood. You leave it there. You've seen enough glory for one day. You return to the city just as the sun begins to sigh. Its golden light spills between the columns, softening the edges of stone that spent the day pretending to be eternal. The streets are quieter now, not silent, just slower. Merchants pack up unsold figs. A dog lies across the doorway of a shrine, unconvinced by the offerings. You walk the same paths you've walked before, only this time with the weight of other people's pain in your steps. The statues don't move. Of course they don't. You pass a likeness of Athena, her spear, her shield, her expression of calculated disapproval. Her marble eyes have watched centuries of footsteps just like yours, and not once did she blink. You find your place again, not a home, but a corner of the courtyard where no one bothers you. You sit back against the wall, watching the last of the fig tree's shadow disappear. Someone's carved something into the base of the nearest column. It's crude, a spiral, a line, maybe just a crack that looked intentional. You touch it. It's still warm from the sun. Nearby, 2 men argue quietly about taxes. One gestures toward the Acropolis, as if the stone buildings themselves collect coin. You think of the girl under the stoa, her secret carvings, the boy writing names in dust, the soldier who didn't come back. the woman scrubbing armor that would never fit her. Historians still argue whether Athens was the birthplace of freedom or the theater of hierarchy, whether its greatness outweighed its cruelty, whether democracy was a promise or a privilege. You don't argue. You remember. The light fades. You lie back and watch the first stars wake up. The same stars that watched them. The same stars that watched you. They don't vote, but they witness. Wind down, 300 words. And now, the city sleeps. The columns cool. The sandals stop. The fig leaves curl ever so slightly under the weight of their own stillness. And you, who have walked the streets, stood in the shadows, seen behind the walls, now lie beneath a sky that doesn't care who ruled, who voted, who vanished. The statues remain where they always are, eyes fixed on nothing, remembering everything. The gods, if they are watching, do so quietly. The breath of the city slows, hearths flicker low. A final amphora is placed on a shelf. A final whispered song escapes the lips of someone who can't forget. You stretch, gently, as if not to disturb the air. Your fingers brush against cool stone, the kind that's worn not by water, but by feet. The voices are gone now. No debate, no decree, just the hush of history settling into dust. You take one more breath, slow and even, the kind you've earned, the kind that says you've seen something heavy and carried it quietly. Sleep now. Sleep, silent citizen. The statues are still watching, and the dust still remembers. End of script. Sweet dreams.